A man named Choi Yu-jai was seen crying as he made a wrong decision when suddenly an unknown woman showed up and shot him dead. 7 years before that, Choi Yu-jai was living his normal life. He was walking to his dream company called Taekang, fully confident that he would be hired there. He had a girlfriend named Jung Ji-so who always rooted for his best and supported him unconditionally. Unfortunately, as he walked, he witnessed a horrible accident where the victim landed right in front of him and begged him for help. That scared him to death as he began shaking during his interview and ended up failing it. Since then, his life had been a mess as he had to do odd jobs to make ends meet. He tried hundreds of times until he managed to get another chance as he impressed the HRD and CEO of the company with his tenacity. But a new problem arose when Yu-jai found out that his friend had caused him a great loss after his friend made a mistake in predicting the investment that Yu-jai made using the money he had collected. He was so triggered he rushed to meet his friend only to find out that he had run away. Upon knowing that, he made a commotion there and ended up arrested by the police. Devastated after losing all of his money, he saw his girlfriend Ji-so with another man. He felt that he would only be a burden for her and her perfect life if he kept their relationship, so he approached her after the man left and immediately broke up with her, leaving her crying. The problem didn't stop there as he found all his belongings outside of his apartment in the rain when he came home. His landlord chose to kick him out because he couldn't pay the rent. He could only sit and lamented his bad luck. The next morning, yet another problem came to him. Taekang contacted him and said that they decided not to hire him. With all those problems bombarding him continuously, he decided to commit suicide, feeling there was nothing left in life for him. But instead of going to the afterlife, he woke up inside a plane in someone else's body. There he also met the woman that was seen at the beginning of the movie. It was revealed that the woman was Death. She was insulted by Yu-jai's decision to end his life and decided to punish him for wasting his life. She decided to make a death game for Yu-jai to go through, or he would end up in hell. He would enter 12 bodies that were facing death and had to survive in one of them. Yu-jai, who thought that there was no reason for him to live, took the game for granted, but as soon as the woman left and the plane began shaking terribly, he was scared to death. Fortunately, the plane gained control and he was saved. He then looked around the plane when suddenly a crystal ball flew towards him. The crystal ball was the memory of the owner of the body he possessed. He was Park Jin-tae, a 33-year-old and the second son of Taekang owner. He was known for his intelligence and was more reliable than his older brother. He was also the CEO of the company. Knowing that, Yu-jai felt happy, feeling that he could finally live in peace, but soon the plane lost control once again as the machine caught fire. All the crew died in front of his eyes, and soon he also died because of the accident. After waking up, he found himself in front of Death, who welcomed him and said that he had lost one of his chances and left with 11 more. Yu-jai felt that he was being played by her, but Death denied it. Yu-jai said that he didn't care about the game because he already felt something worse than death itself, so Death brought him to a place where he would spend the rest of eternity if he failed. Upon seeing the place, Yu-jai was so scared, afraid that he would end up there. He never imagined such a place ever existed. Death then said that Yu-jai had wasted the life that God gave to him, and to pay for his mistake, he had to pass the game. He had no other choice but to play the game as he possessed another body. The second he woke up, he found himself in mid-air without a parachute. The crystal ball then came, and Yu-jai found out that the body he possessed belonged to a 38-year-old man named Jae Seop, an extreme sports athlete who had broken a lot of world records, and he was in the middle of breaking another record by skydiving without a parachute and had to land in a net that had been prepared. He would receive a lot of money if he managed to break the record. Upon finding out about it, he tried his best to make it out, only to fail and plunge to his death. He then woke up once again in front of Death with one less chance. Death was about to shoot him to start another round, but Yu-jai stopped her. He felt that everything would be in vain if he didn't have the chance to survive. Death told him to figure it out himself because his sin was great enough to anger God. She had done it fairly by giving him the memory and the ability of the person he possessed. Shortly after Death shot him, Yu-jai found himself inside the body of Yak-soo, a 17-year-old geeky high school student who often got bullied by his classmate named Jin-sung. Yak-soo couldn't fight back or report him because Jin-sung was backed by a senior and was afraid that he would make his mother sad. Yak-soo was planning to commit suicide, so Yu-jai knew that the only thing he needed to do was not commit suicide so he could survive. Gai-jae tried to confront Jin-sung, and with his ability as a grown man, he managed to fight back, but what he didn't expect was that Jin-sung had a stronger friend who could defend him. Yu-jai once again got bullied, but this time he realized that the strong boy, the friend of Jin-sung, also had a grudge against Jin-sung, so he used it as an opportunity to fight back. When Yu-jai returned to Yak-soo's house, he found out that Yak-soo also had a mother who loved him very much and always cared about him so much making him remember his mother who cared about him so much when he was still alive. The next day, Yujai approached Jin Sung's friend to gain his trust. He asked the boy why he always obeyed Jin Sung, and the boy said that Jin Sung knew some senior who could defend him, so Yujai planned for them to give Jin Sung a lesson. During recess, Yujai deliberately made fun of Jin Sung. He also told Jin Sung's friend not to help him, so Jin Sung had no other choice but to call the senior. And when his senior found out that Jin Sung called him to help him deal with a geeky student, he would lose the senior's trust, and only then the boy, Jin Sung's friend, would be able to fulfill his grudge on Jin Sung. That incident left Jin Sung devastated and could only run in fear. That night, when Yujai was walking home, he was happy that he could finally avoid death, but soon, the situation turned 180 degrees as Jin Sung showed up and hit him with a big rock to his death. When he woke up in the place of death, Yujai immediately protested because he felt that Death was interfering behind his back by instigating Jin Sung to kill him. Death felt offended and said that she wasn't interfering at all and was just watching, meaning it was all thanks to Yujai's decision. Feeling it was unfair, Yujai asked Death to give him a strong body that could fight back, so Death shot him once again as she smiled. When Yujai woke up, he was in the middle of interrogation. Confused about what happened, he stalled for time until the crystal ball came and showed him the memory of the body he possessed. Soon, the crystal came and showed him that he was possessing the body of Ju-hoon, a 35-year-old secret organization fixer. He was also confident of the mafia, but he betrayed his boss because he fell in love with his boss's girl, and to be able to live with the woman he loved, he stole money belonging to his boss. He was interrogated because his boss asked for the money and his woman back. Knowing that Ju-hoon's body was very strong, Yujai immediately defeated everyone who was interrogating him and escaped from there. He planned to escape so he could avoid death and enjoy the money that Ju-hoon had stolen. While riding his motorbike, the mafia underlings began chasing him. The boss also put a big bounty on his head, so every single person was now hunting him, including many police officers. Fortunately, he managed to avoid and beat those who were chasing him. Yujai arrived at a mall where he was surrounded, but he cleverly got into the elevator. He reached the roof only to get surrounded again. Knowing there was no way out, Yujai decided to jump into the pool on the ground floor and made everyone stunned. After escaping from the chase, Yujai arrived at the pier to meet the woman Ju-hoon loved. The woman asked where he hid the money, and Yujai, without any hesitation, told the place, and only after that, the woman shot him dead. Feeling he had done his best to survive death, Yujai woke up in Death's place cursing. Death smiled seeing him. Yujai felt something was wrong and then asked Death why the woman had the heart to kill him. Death said that was the nature of humans. Just like Yujai, who wasted his life for not having any money, the woman also murdered him only for money. Death called him stupid for not suspecting anything, but he just smiled because he had lied to the woman about where the money was. Yujai then asked Death to immediately shoot him so he could continue the next game of Death, even though the real reason was for him to immediately take the money. Death immediately shot Yujai, who not long after woke up inside a prison. He was so upset, knowing that he would not be able to carry out his plan to take the money. Soon, the warden opened the door and told Yujai to go back to his prison room. Amidst the confusion because he didn't know what was happening, he saw that every single inmate seemed to have a grudge against the owner of the body that Yujai was possessing. And when he entered his prison room, he understood a little about the situation. His cellmates greeted him warmly and told him to watch his attitude because he would be free in 4 days. Hearing that, Yujai felt a little relaxed because he would soon be able to take the money. Soon, the warden opened the door, and suddenly, all the prisoners were scared after a psychopath appeared. How upset Yujai was when he saw that the new cellmate was none other than Jin Sung, the one who had killed Yaksu. He immediately hit Jin Sung because he was still upset about what Jin Sung did to Yaksu, but his friends immediately stopped him, afraid that the psychopath Jin Sung would repay him greatly. Jin Sung then said that he promised not to let Yujai out of prison alive, but Yujai wasn't afraid of Jin Sung's threat. Shortly after, the crystal ball appeared and showed Yujai that the body he possessed was a man named Tae-sung, a 21-year-old aspiring MMA fighter who gave up his dream due to his family condition. The reason he went to prison was to replace someone who committed a hit-and-run in exchange for money. He did that after seeing his mother suffering from owing money from the loan sharks. Unfortunately, when the trial was held, the victim of the hit-and-run suddenly died, forcing him to be imprisoned for 2 years. Tae-sung complied with the agreement and asked for more money because he was charged more than what was agreed upon. He threatened to tell everything to the media if his demands were not met. Upon knowing that, Yujai thought about what might kill him in this life when suddenly Jin Sung said that his thirst for blood was unbearable. Everyone was scared to hear Jin Sung's words except for Yu Jai, who laughed because he knew everything Jin Sung said was a lie. Annoyed with him, Ye Jai then told his roommate to guard the door and told them not to interfere with anything he was going to do. Yu Jai then approached Jin Sung and immediately hit him repeatedly while saying that Jin Sung was just a loser who had the heart to kill the innocent Yaksu. Jin Sung didn't think that Ye Jai could find out the secret and immediately begged for forgiveness because he had lied by claiming to be a cruel psychopath. After hearing Jin Sung's words, all the occupants of the room who felt they had been fooled flocked and beaten Jin Sung. After that incident, Jin Sung was constantly scared by all the cellmates and could only obey what they told him. The next day, when Ye Jai was working at the workshop, a prisoner tried to harm him. But thanks to his good reflexes, he managed to avoid the attack and even caused the person who intended to harm him to be injured, causing the warden on duty to immediately take the person for treatment. But it turned out that everyone inside the workshop had planned to kill him. Tae-sung's cellmate, who was there with him, immediately ran away. However, Tae-sung's body was good at fighting, so Yu Jai could easily defeat everyone who was targeting him. Just when he finished, his cellmate returned to help. After that, his cellmate confided in him about his fate after getting out of prison because he was afraid that he would not have the opportunity to repent for his mistakes. Hearing that, Yu Jai remembered the decision he took when he committed suicide and now had to go through the death's game. With everything he had experienced, Yu Jai told him that it was not too late for him to repent and have a future. His cellmate was relieved to hear that. That night, when Yu Jai and all the cellmates were asleep, Jin Sung had planned to kill Yu Jai when he was sleeping, but Ye Jai found out about it, which made him feel disgusted with Jin Sung. At first, he intended to kill Jin Sung, but remembering that he would be out of prison the next day, he decided to teach Jin Sung a lesson by saying that Yaksu's ghost was there. At first, Jin Sung didn't believe it, but when Yu Jai told him everything that Jin Sung had done to Yaksu, Jin Sung was immediately afraid, even going so far as to wet himself. The next day, when Ye Jai was about to be released, he told Jin Sung that the ghost of Yaksu would always hunt him for his life, leaving him in fear. Ye Jai, who had just come out of prison, was greeted by the original suspect's lawyer to give him the money he had asked for. But Yu Jai, who did not want to be involved in matters that would harm him, refused the money and said that he would no longer say anything about the incident. He then immediately rushed to the dock where Ju-hoo kept his money and soon managed to find it. Feeling he would be able to skip death, he was relieved and took a nap there. When asleep, Yu Jai saw his mother, but it was just a dream. Shortly after, he got a call, and when he saw it, it was from Tae-sung's mother. Didn't want to have the same fate as himself. Yu Jai picked up the call and immediately cried when Tae-sung's mother apologized for making Tae-sung's life miserable because of his sacrifice. Didn't want to make Tae-sung's mother worry, so Yu Jai decided to go home, but before that, he went to the station and put all the money he had into the locker there. The locker had a 4-day time limit, or whatever inside the locker would be confiscated. After doing that, he rushed to Tae-sung's mother's place. On his way home, someone approached and immediately stabbed him. It turned out that the person was the father of the accident victim who was taking revenge. Ye Jai finally realized that it was how he died in this body. He tried to explain that he was not the real culprit of the accident, but he replaced the real culprit for the sake of money. After hearing that, the man ran away, and not long after that, his cellmate showed up, but unexpectedly, he was not there to help him but to kill him. He was someone the real culprit hired to kill him. There was nothing he could do but to die again in his cellmate's hand. When he woke up in Death's place, Yu Jai regretted not being able to meet Tae-sung's mother, who was very worried about Tae-sung, while Death looked satisfied because now Yu Jai was starting to feel the regret. Yu Jai remembered the money he had kept in the locker and then asked Death to immediately shoot him, but before he was shot, he saw Death grinned at him. Ye Jai immediately understood what Death's smile meant because he possessed the body of a baby who couldn't do anything and could only cry. At first, he felt that he could survive death because his parents would protect him, but he soon realized that his parents were nothing but abusive parents who then killed him. Ye Jai immediately protested after he woke up in Death's place, feeling he was being played because he had to survive in the body of a baby who couldn't do anything. Death then said that this was a lesson for him who wasted his life. So many people wanted to live but couldn't do anything. Hearing that, Yu Jai felt slapped by the words, but deep down in his heart, he only cared about the money. Unexpectedly, Death knew what he said in his heart and said that she didn't care about anything he wanted to do. After those words were spoken, Death immediately shot him, who then woke up in the body of a handsome man who was coincidentally at the station, allowing him to take out the money he had kept in his locker immediately. Soon the crystal ball came and Ye Jai found out that the body he possessed was a 24-year-old model named John Yu, admired by everyone. When Yu Jai arrived at John Yu's house, he was so excited to see all of John Yu's collection of clothes and luxury watches. Soon after, he got a call from his friend who told him to come to the nightclub for a party. He immediately came to enjoy his life, drinking the alcohol he never tasted before. There, Yujai was introduced by his friend to a man who had a big influence, the CEO of Taekang Park Taiwu. Yujai felt that he had seen him before, but he couldn't remember it, especially since he was not sober at that time. In the morning, Yujai was woken up by someone who turned out to be John Yu's brother, who told him to keep his promise to help him work a day at the cafe. He had nothing to do, so he accepted it, but then something unexpected happened. He met Jaiso, his girlfriend from his past life, who was a regular customer at the cafe, which immediately reminded him of his past when he was with her. When he was giving the tea she ordered, Yujai's hand suddenly trembled, making his older brother realize that his younger brother had fallen in love with Jaiso. His older brother said that Jaiso was a famous novelist who had a brilliant career after the novels she wrote sold well in the market. Curious about it, Yujai searched the internet about Jaiso and immediately rushed to the bookstore to buy her novel. He read the novel as his heart trembled with tears flowing. After all, the novel written by Jaiso talked about his story, who always tried his best to do whatever he could to please Jaiso. He then saw the man who he thought was her crush turn out to be her own older brother, making him feel like a stupid man because he immediately came to bad conclusions when he saw that man with her. Yujai then told John Yu's brother that he would work every day at the cafe, nothing more than so he would be able to always see Jaiso. At one point, Yujai dared to talk to Jaiso by pretending to offer her a cake and said that he was a big fan of the books she wrote. He then said that he had a story that Jaiso had to hear to use as a reference for her next novel. It was none other than his story about the death game he experienced. It was so realistic how he conveyed the protagonist in detail and soulfully. Jaiso curiously asked the name of the protagonist, which Yujai refused to tell. Shortly after, Jaiso said goodbye, but before she left, Yujai asked her to sign his book. That was when he saw that she was using the pen he intended to give to her before he died. It turned out that his mother had given the pen to her when she came to attend his funeral. The next day, Jaiso, increasingly curious about Yujai's story, then asked why the protagonist never met his mother. Upon hearing that, he just fell silent, not knowing what to say. After Jaiso left that day, it was suddenly raining outside. He was worried about Jaiso, so he immediately rushed to give her an umbrella. When he returned to the cafe and was cleaning up broken glass that had fallen, he heard someone said about an accident nearby which claimed the life of a woman with an umbrella. He immediately ran to the scene, thinking it was Jaiso. He didn't even care that his hand was bleeding while remembering Death's words, who said that suffering beyond death would soon begin. Arriving at the scene, Yujai was so scared when he saw the same umbrella as what he gave to Jaiso was destroyed. He couldn't control his emotions and tried to get past the police officers, but unexpectedly, Jaiso was fine. She was surprised to see John Yu acting like that. After Yujai calmed down, Jaiso saw Yujai's hand was injured and very sweetly treated, reminding her of when she received the news of Yujai's death. The next day, Jaiso came to Yujai's grave while blaming herself for not understanding Yujai's condition and making her lose him. Unexpectedly, Yujai was there and heard everything. Yujai then went to his own grave after she left, but not long after, he was startled by a familiar voice, the voice of his mother, who happened to be here too. Yujai was nervous when he saw his mother for the first time since he died and immediately left her. He then overheard how hurt his mother was to lose him, the only one she had in the world, making him cry because he regretted choosing to commit suicide. Yujai then made a letter which he put in a bag containing Ju-hoon's money and gave it all to his mother secretly. In the evening, after talking with Jaiso, Yujai asked if he could walk her home, and even though Jaiso refused, he heeded her words and immediately went to walk with her. When they were about to part ways, Yujai couldn't hold back his secret from Jaiso, then said that the story he told about the game of death was indeed real, and he was the one who experienced it himself, and the name of the protagonist was Yujai, who had always loved Jaiso all this time. Jaiso couldn't believe what she just heard, but hearing his words, which were the same as what Yujai said and experienced, made Jaiso couldn't help but believe it. Sadly, before Yujai said everything, a car suddenly hit them both, which immediately killed Jaiso while Yujai was dying. While holding back the pain, Yujai tried to see who the person who hit him was, who turned out to be Taiwu, the CEO of Taekang, where Yujai then realized that all the bodies that were possessed and always died were caused by him. While Taiwu saw that Yujai was still alive, immediately killed him. Upon waking up at Death's place, he was very angry because the innocent Jaiso became a victim. He angrily promised to kill Taiwu very cruelly, but because this violated the rules that Death made, he was not allowed to do it. Yujai accused her of enjoying his suffering. Somewhere, a vlogger was doing a live and enthusiastically showed to his audience that he had succeeded in catching a murderer who the police had been looking for. He then beat the man until someone came and beat him and his cameraman to death. After that, the man brought the person with him. His intention was none other than to kill the man too, to make a work of art for his painting, where the man's identity was a cruel psychopath who has a hobby of making paintings out of the blood of his victims. Jai was devastated to witness the death of his beloved one in the hands of Taiwu. He was so angry, he was so determined to take revenge, but because it violates the rules, Jai was not allowed to kill humans, because if that was done, death would immediately intervene and take him to hell without finishing his game of death. Realizing that, Jai immediately ran towards death and quickly took the gun to shoot her, and after he felt he had made death feel what he felt, he shot himself so that he could quickly avenge Taiwu. But when he tried to do it, nothing happened. Suddenly, Death was already standing in front of him while regenerating her wound. Death then explained that he would not be hurt or die by anything even if he tried to burn her, because she was death itself. Jai then asked whether this time Death was the mastermind behind all the deaths. Jaiso, who did nothing wrong, had to die. When she heard Jai's words, Death laughed and said that he was not a creature that Jai could understand. Even her current form was a form she created to make it easier for her to communicate with humans like Jai, and if she wanted to, she could change her form at any time. After saying that, Death changed her form to a scary creature. And after that, Death changed her form again to Jaiso, which immediately made Jai freeze and told her to stop changing her form into Jaiso. Jai, who at first was afraid, became more enthusiastic to continue the game. His goal was none other than taking revenge on Taiwu. Although, of course, it wouldn't be easy because Death had warned Jai not to do it, as she would immediately come and drag Jai to hell. But he seemed indifferent because his goal now was only one, namely to avenge Taiwu. Not long after, Jai realized that he had possessed none other than the psychopath man. Jai, who didn't know who he had possessed, tried to find out by looking around until he felt a little scared seeing every painting displayed there. Soon a crystal ball appeared and showed him that the body he was now possessing was a man named Giyu Chul, a 34-year-old psychopath who had been good at painting since he was little, but reality hit him hard when he found out that nobody liked his painting until one night he accidentally saw someone committed suicide right in front of him. Seeing the victim's expression inspired him to it as a painting, which then sold for a fantastic price and received praise from critics. Since then, he always looked for victims to get other inspiration. He was so obsessed with making the victim's blood as paint for his paintings. Knowing that the body he was possessing was a devil made him so shocked that he fell over and vomited because he couldn't believe such crazy people like Gyukul. But remember that his goal was to avenge Taiwu, who made Jaiso die. Jai happily accepted the situation because, with Gyukul's intuition as a psychopath, it would make all his plans easier. As a first step, Jai returned to the last place where he and Jaiso died, and with a clear memory of the incident, he managed to find Jaiso's pen, which was thrown into the drain. After that, by combining Gyukul's intuition and Jai's memory, he managed to find the memory card that was thrown away by Taiwu's lawyer. At that time, the lawyer was lured by Taiwu with money and good position. Jai realized that the evidence he found was still not enough to put him behind bars because Taiwu was a CEO of Taking, who had influence and connections with important officials who could easily get rid of his case, especially in his company. Taiwu was well known as a kind CEO who was highly respected by his father and always thought that his employees were family and could even pass the psychopath seminar tests conducted by the company. When planning his revenge on Taiwu, Jai suddenly fainted only to wake up at a hospital and found out that Giyu Chul's body suffered an incurable tumor and only had a month left. Feeling like he only had a short time, Jai immediately started his plan. Unexpectedly, by chance, Taiwu's secretary contacted him, saying that Taiwu was interested in his paintings and would buy them at whatever price. This was a golden opportunity, so Jai immediately rushed to meet Taiwu. When they met, Jai looked so helpless and wanted to immediately kill Taiwu, but remembering the threat from death if he were to try to kill him, Jai negotiated to be able to meet Taiwu again while thinking about other ways to take his revenge. Meanwhile, Taiwu was about to go home when he received information from his secretary, who said that the seminar he had attended was done by his father on purpose to test him, making him very worried because he was afraid that his father would find out that the person who caused his sister's accident was him. And at that moment, Taiwu drove his car recklessly, which was seen by two police detectives who immediately tried to stop him. At a dead end, Taiwu, who was under drug influence, was asked by the police to get out of the car, but he instead contacted a police general he knew and told the police, who was chasing him, to apologize. Thanks to his influence, one of the police officers who was chasing him feared him and let him do whatever he wanted. After that, Taiwu drove his car back. When he got back to his house, Jai was waiting for him, who didn't understand why Jai was at his house. Tai Wu asked about his purpose and said that his aim was none other than to do something to him. Feeling that he was being threatened, Tai Wu tried to kill Yu Jai first, but Yu Jai could easily beat him in terms of fighting. Not wanting to be underestimated, Tai Wu took a rifle in his car and immediately shot Yu Jai. Feeling he had killed Yu Jai, Tai Wu approached him. But it turned out that Yu Jai was still alive because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. With his skill, Yu Jai managed to beat Tai Wu unconscious and then took him to the house where Gyu Chul killed his victims. On their way, Tai Wu woke up and asked Yu Jai's purpose in taking him. Yu Jai explained that he was a psychopath who had killed 15 people, and this time, he would make him his next target. When he heard this, Tai Wu's hands were shaking so much. When they arrived, Yu Jai suddenly collapsed without even tying Tai Wu. When he woke up, he was the one who had been tied, and in front of him, Tai Wu looked very excited and felt the sensation he missed when he killed people when he heard Yu Jai's story earlier when he killed his 15 people, because the reason he hit innocent people without hesitation was that he wanted to feel the sensation he previously felt when he accidentally hit someone. When the victim asked for help, he felt like a god who could control someone's life. After that, he never felt the sensation again until Yu Jai told him about his story before. Shortly after, Tai Wu killed Yu Jai slowly. He then ended up waking up in Death's place again, with a clock showing that Yu Jai's only chance was left 4 more times. Death left laughing seeing how Yu Jai felt the pain of slow death. He then warned him not to break the rules or she would intervene and immediately threw Yu Jai into hell. Hearing that, Yu Jai laughed while glaring sharply at Death, making her realize that Yu Jai was deliberately killed by Tai Wu because it was part of his plan. It turned out that previously Yu Jai had prepared a CCTV to record Tai Wu's actions when he killed Gyu Chul, and Yu Jai immediately asked Death to immediately shoot him because he wanted to continue his plan to avenge Tai Wu's actions. Death, who didn't expect Yu Jai's crazy plan, then warned him to focus and not waste the few opportunities he had left because if he continued to do this, he would suffer heavy regrets, but Yu Jai answered that he would do whatever he thought was right. Knowing he couldn't warn him anymore, Death shot Yu Jai again to continue the game. Since he had a purpose now, Yu Jai seemed to be enjoying the game. When he woke up, Yu Jai possessed the body of a detective who once stopped Tai Wu when he was speeding. Not long after, a crystal ball came and showed that the body he possessed was a 42-year-old police detective named Ji Yang, the son of a reliable police officer who was killed while carrying out his duties. He admired his father as a reliable policeman and succeeded in being accepted as a police officer, but this made his mother afraid because what happened to her husband might happen again. So Jia Hyong promised his mother that he would prioritize his safety before anything else, and because of that promise, he would run away in critical situations while on duty, making all of his co-workers think of him as a pathetic loser. Since his mother died, Ji Yang remained a pathetic officer who couldn't even defend his colleague. Knowing all this, Yu Jai was happy because what people didn't know was that Ji Yang was actually a reliable officer, and that he could prove it to anyone as well as take his revenge on Tai Wu. When he realized it, he saw a man making a commotion in the crowd and immediately tried to resolve the problem. Turned out it was the man who killed him when he possessed Taesung. He confronted the man, which led the man to confess his action of killing Taesung and immediately charged at him. But thankfully, with his ability, Yu Jai managed to pin down the man, and since the people around were filming him, he went viral and amazed his colleagues and superior. Later, Yu Jai invited his fellow police to go to Gyu Chul's place to retrieve the footage when Tai Wu killed him when he possessed Gyu Chul. Somewhere else, Tai Wu felt another urge to kill, which he then invited his secretary to go with him to Gyu Chul's, where his purpose was none other than to kill her. Meanwhile, Yu Jai had managed to get the CCTV footage in Gyu Chul's house. He then told his colleague to call the forensic team to investigate the place because without his colleague knowing, every single corner of the house was all but blood, and that was proved when the investigation was carried out as when the forensic team began it. They were shocked to find blood stains all over the place. After the investigation, Yu Jai was seen waiting for someone none other than Tai Wu. He had a hunch that Tai Wu might done his action again, and he was right when he saw Tai Wu and his secretary about to enter the place. He stopped them and asked the secretary's name to make sure that should something wrong happen to her, he knew who the last person she was with. That made Tai Wu angry and later let her go by dropping her in the middle of the street. He didn't stop there, as the very next day he called someone to get rid of Yu Jai because he felt that Yu Jai had known about his depraved actions. Yu Jai, on the other hand, went to a reporter to give the footage of Tai Wu, who had killed him when he possessed Gyu Chul. He also told his colleague that Gyu Chul, the psychopath and serial killer, had died in the hands of Tai Wu, the CEO of Taekang, and he deliberately didn't give the proof to his boss, afraid that Tai Wu might do something since he had a connection in the police department. Sadly, Yujai had to face another problem when he found out that his mother stumbled upon a problem related to the money that Yujai gave to her secretly, making him devastated because he kept causing trouble for his mother even after he died. He couldn't do anything but look at his mother from afar when suddenly someone came to him and stabbed him. He managed to see the face of his attacker, who turned out to be the mafia he once beaten when he possessed Ju-hoong's body. Somewhere else, Tae-woo realized that his father had hired someone to watch over him. He then confronted his father and showed his true self and threatened his father. After that, he drove his car, speeding, and stopped someone in the middle of the road just so he could kill him. He then went to the church, not to admit his sins, but to proclaim himself as the god who controlled over someone's life. Shortly after, Tae-woo received information that someone had given the footage of him killing Gyu-chul to the news station. Turned out that Yujai survived and was waiting for Tae-woo to turn himself in, but of course, with his influence, Tae-woo forced the police department to make peace with Yujai in exchange for money and a good position in the department. Yujai immediately refused it because he had no other purpose but to avenge what Tae-woo had done to him. The news regarding Tae-woo's depraved action was about to be broadcast, but before that happened, Tae-woo held a press conference saying that he deliberately killed Gyu-chul, the serial killer, to defend himself. Because of that, people began calling him a hero for saving a lot of lives by killing the serial killer. Tae-woo then approached Yujai and told him that he would never lose to anyone and would take revenge on anyone who dared to fight him. Soon after, Yujai was kidnapped, and the kidnapper immediately called Tae-woo, who was about to take a flight, that he had kidnapped Yujai. Tae-woo told him to wait for him to return home because he wanted to kill Yujai himself, so you'd feel the sensation of killing someone again. On his flight, Tae-woo used a drug and immediately fell asleep, only to wake up after the plane shook relay hard and lost control. He then heard someone talk about the crime he committed and told him the only chance he could survive was to jump from the plane using a parachute. He immediately ran to the cockpit to see the pilot, but he couldn't find anyone there. He had no other choice but to jump using the parachute, which he managed to do and save himself from the crash. But as soon as he landed, a car came and hit him. The driver of the car was none other than Yujai, who was possessing Ji-young's body. The scene returned to before the crash happened. It was all planned by Yujai and his colleague, knowing it wouldn't be easy to teach a lesson to Tae-woo, who had a big influence. By combining the abilities and memories of the people he had possessed before, he stole the footage of Tae-woo's crime from the mafia using Ju-hoong's memory and ability, using the memory of Jin Tae, Tae-woo's brother, to change Tae-woo's drug with sleeping drug, using Jae-seop's ability to jump from the plane safely, and use Jeon-yu's memory to kill him like what he did to him before. However, since he killing Tae-woo violated the rule from death, she immediately descended to Earth to stop him. But just when Yujai was choking Tae-woo, the pen that reminded him of Jisoo fell from his pocket. He remembered how Jisoo told him to end everything with a happy ending, so he stopped. But when he walked away, Tae-woo tried to kill him, only to be stopped by the wind that dragged the parachute that he had forgotten to strap off from, and he was struck by a truck passing by. After that incident, the media reported the truth behind Tae-woo's crime, and all the police officers related were arrested. Yujai then went to the hospital to see Tae-woo, who turned out to be still alive, but had to lose his legs that were amputated due to the accident. Seeing Tae-woo's condition, he thought that he had done his revenge. He then went to Jisoo's grave to thank her for stopping him from killing Tae-woo. Long story short, several months passed, Yujai used Ji-young's body and, along with his partner, became a very famous police detective who eradicated crime. Not only that, the two of them succeeded in disbanding the mafia group even though his partner was injured and had to be treated in hospital. That was when he knew that his partner had married and had a daughter, who at that crime cried for seeing her father was injured. Yujai then promised to always keep her father safe. Shortly after his partner was discharged from the hospital, they immediately went on a mission to catch a drug dealer, who then once again shot his partner. He remembered his promise to his partner's daughter to keep her father safe, so he decided to sacrifice himself even though he had to die. When he once again woke up in front of Death, Death looked angry because he once again had wasted his chance for nothing, but Yujai immediately denied that by saying that he wanted to save his colleague who had a family, not like him, who never had the chance to build one. When Death heard it, she grinned and shot him to send him to another body he had to possess. When he woke up, Yujai had now possessed a homeless person who was always shunned by people. He then saw the news about Ji-young's death and how people praised him for his sacrifice for saving his partner, making him proud of himself. But when he came to Ji-hyung's funeral, everyone who passed him instead, he ran away. Even his colleague's daughter and the colleague he saved didn't recognize him at all. That was when he felt there was no point in doing anything if it wasn't his real life. He walked away thinking about everything when he slipped on the stairs and fell to his death. When he woke up in Death's place, he found himself left with only 2 chances left. He then told Death that no matter what happened, He didn't care about anything anymore because it wasn't his life anymore. Death then told him that he would soon feel something more horrible than death itself, but he just wanted to end everything as soon as possible, and said that whoever he would possess later, he would immediately commit suicide. After Death shot him, he found himself possessing the body of a man who was on his way to commit suicide. When the crystal ball came, he found out that the man he possessed was an office worker from Taekang, his dream company. He had a family and a good job, but things hit him hard as the company decided to fire him, and even after that, his wife asked for a divorce. Thinking there was nothing he could do, he decided to kill himself. Unexpectedly, this man related to Yu-Jai so much. He was the man who was hit by a car when Yu-Jai walked to his interview when he was still alive, and the man who hit him was Taiwu, as it was his first time feeling the feeling of being a god who could control someone else's life. The man indeed asked for help, but not from Taiwu, but from Death, who was standing behind him, and he also tried to tell something to Yu-Jai, but it turned out to be himself from the future, who tried to warn him not to waste his life. After Yu-Jai returned to Death's place, he kept wondering what just happened and asked Death to shoot him again so he could immediately finish the game, but Death just grinned because she knew Yu-Jai would regret what he just said. Yu-Jai woke up in a place he felt familiar, and when he looked at the mirror, he realized that he was possessing his mother's body. The crystal ball then came and showed him the memory of his own mother he never knew. His mother was an amazing woman. She was a popular girl in school who had high dreams when she was still young. But after he met her husband and gave birth to Yu-Jai, she gave up on her dream as she just wanted to see her family happy. But that didn't last long as her husband died shortly after. Since then, she always prioritized Yu-Jai over everything. She would leave her job when she knew that Yu-Jai was sick, even going as far as to lose her job just because Yu-Jai had a fever. She then had to do odd jobs to make ends meet, but even so, she remained enthusiastic through her hard days and never showed a problem to Yu-Jai until one day, when she was suffering from sickness, she got news that Yu-Jai committed suicide, leaving her in deep sadness and devastation. Because of that, her friend said that she would only bring bad luck to everyone around her. After finding out all of his mother's suffering, Yu-Jai could only cry, regretting his decision to leave her. He finally understood what death meant by something worse than death itself. He finally tried to accept his punishment by living his life as his mother for the rest of his life. Every day he would walk back to the station to go to work and would walk back home while bearing all the soreness all over his body. On his day off, he would climb the mountain because he knew that her mother also wanted to do so. He continued to walk over the soreness and finally reached the top of the mountain, and only then he apologized to his mother for what he had done. Later, he walked down, but in the middle of the trip, he fell into a ravine and left him injured. He tried to ask for help, but nobody heard him. He was about to give up when suddenly he realized that he possessed his mother's body and decided to keep going and tried all his might to save his mother's body. After hours of trying to crawl his way back to the trail, he finally managed to save himself. When he woke up, he realized that he had woken up in the hospital instead of in front of death, meaning he managed to avoid death. He continuously apologized to his mother for his mistakes and for committing suicide without even knowing how devastated his mother would be. He then continued his life for the next 32 years until he died peacefully of old age in his mother's body after a happy life. He woke up in front of death for the last time as it was his last chance. Upon seeing death, he kneeled and begged her to give him a last chance to live as himself once again so he could make amends to his mother, but death said that all the 12 bullets had been used and there was no more chance for him. He kept begging. He said that if he couldn't return to his old life, then he just wanted to hug his mother for the last time before being punished. Death then said that he had managed to survive death in his last chance and thus he wouldn't be punished. She then told him that she would give him a last chance to go back to life, but he had to be very lucky to pull Russian roulette. Since there was only one bullet, if he didn't manage to get shot by it, he would be sent to the afterlife and his fate would be handed to God. He accepted the condition and Death gave him the gun for him to shoot himself, and sure enough, he got shot and woke up in his old body on the top of the building, about to commit suicide. Suddenly, he got a call from his mother and he picked up the call, revealing that he actually stopped himself from committing suicide and made amends for his previous mistake.